the first thing to do is to fix the personnel of the DOJ, because the DOJ is stacked with traitors, criminals, people like, Charles McGonigal and others in the FBI who serve mafia syndicates. The DOJ has often been used as a front for organized crime. And I think here it's important to specify that the DOJ encompasses a lot of organizations within the broader banner, some of which are less corrupt than others, but some of which are incredibly corrupt. The first of which, of course, is the FBI itself, which historically has been used for the persecution of activists, for illegal surveillance on U.S. citizens, is supposed to be used for things like stopping terrorism, stopping, a coup, stopping mafia activity. It increasingly is not. I mean, honestly, it was never really formed for this purpose. If you read any biography of J. Edgar Hoover, it was for, selective prosecution of elements in American society who they found threatening, say people like, Martin Luther King, while other people like, say, Meyer Lansky could go on, and do whatever they wanted. They were notorious, the FBI was, for denying that the mafia even existed. And now that we have, infiltration of our institutions by organized crime, they continue to do that. So that's one of these agencies that, sometimes I wonder, do we need this? Should the whole thing just be broken apart? You keep the parts that are actually out there trying to arrest terrorists and violent, groups, KKK types and whatnot. The rest of it, I'm not sure. I feel similarly. I look at, the DEA and how that has transpired over my life as a child of the Reagan 80s, as a child of an era where they, helped the crack epidemic spread, used it as a pretext to arrest Black and Latino and impoverished Americans. And meanwhile, of course, you see opioid dynasties like the Sacklers getting let off the hook, being granted a kind of permanent immunity in the courts. That's also under the banner of the DOJ. You have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, who I remember from my adolescent years, from all the times they went out and murdered American citizens. Many of these American citizens were part of extremist and violent groups, but they were often the children of people in violent extremist groups, as we saw in Waco, as we saw in Ruby Ridge. And the way that they behaved and the lack of accountability for their actions helped spur the modern hard right terrorist movements that we see today. There has been a lack of accountability. I mean, that is the main thing with the DOJ, is we need an explanation, an apology, a thorough internal investigation, and reconsideration of what elements of the DOJ need to exist, what parts can be reformed, and what parts should be gutted. Because we do need some kind of body that handles, the prosecution of state crimes, the prosecution of, corporations or mafia syndicates that are so vast that they can't be held, in a court of law under, state or local jurisdictions. There's a reason the DOJ exists, but I think it is too big. It is ineffective at the things it is most needed to do, and very effective at things it does not need to do. Like I said, spy on and, abuse activists and civil rights leaders. And it's just a disaster, and the fetishizing of it is, another layer of it. I would also like to note that the DOJ has a public relations office, and the job of this public relations office is to inform the American people of what the DOJ is doing. They don't actually act in total secrecy for years at a time. They do things like hold press conferences. That is what every attorney general before Merrick Garland did, including all the shitty ones, including heads of the FBI like Mueller, who would make whole speeches about how organized crime was going these days. There was more transparency and less of this, pseudo secret bullshit in which, the DOJ is just acting as a cover-up crew for the Trump crime cult and its affiliates, which often overlap with the backers and donors to the Democratic Party, because this is a crisis that encapsulates both sides. So yeah, I could answer this longer, but we'll keep it moving, or I'm going to be here all day.
All right. So Hannah writes, Can you talk about the DOJ dropping their investigations and refusing to charge Matt Gaetz? I'm so fucking livid I can explode. Yeah, you and me both, Hannah. Matt Gaetz is the head of the Putin caucus in the Kremlin. I'm sorry, in the House.
A distinction without a difference.
Right, right. And so, with that said, I mean, Matt Gaetz is seriously leading a group of House Republicans against Ukraine, trying to muddy the waters there with the Nazi America First rhetoric in the interwar period, especially in the years leading up to the early 1940s of America, right before Pearl Harbor. You had the Henry Fords, the Charles Lindberghs, spouting Nazi talking points. Lindbergh even got a medal from the Nazis, just like Rex Tillerson, Trump's Secretary of State, got a medal from the Kremlin. And they hated being compared to Nazis, but if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a Nazi duck, as we all know very well. And so Matt Gaetz is a straight up Russian fascist sympathizer. He wants to weaken Ukraine's resistance against an existential genocide and empower fascism in Russia. Why? Because that would make Matt Gaetz and the other fascists have an easier time consolidating and coming to power here in the US. That's what it's about. It really is about that, just like it was back then, and it's about that today. And so the DOJ not going after him when there's smoke and fire there, as we all know, it's like the kind of thing like getting Al Capone on taxes. Like there's enough there that they could have gotten him on this technicality bullshit. And the fact that they let him go means that it's just another reminder that the DOJ is a bullshit organization. It's deeply compromised. It's been purged beyond belief. It's like what the Kremlin wants to do to the European Union with many different Brexits across the EU by empowering Hungary, the DeSantis of the EU, like a aspiring obvious autocrat in the EU. It's like what these fascists want, whether they're at home or abroad, is to weaken all the organizations that might hold them accountable. The DOJ is gone. What they're up to now is just window dressing.